I can prove that God exists to anyone who is honest with themselves.
Oh, what a great start. Just immediately invalidating anyone who doesn't accept your argument as essentially lying pieces of crap. Fantastic. And of course, doing so doesn't immediately accidentally paint you as the one incapable of being honest with themselves and everyone else. Pro tip, if your argument is that good, you don't actually have to tell people that they must accept it or be a piece of garbage. Shonk. Also, because he has essentially a green screen behind him, he has implicitly agreed to be traveling around the world for the rest of the video.
All life contains genes and proteins. These genes are this functional information made up of nucleotides into functional sequences. All right? Proving that nucleotides can come about naturally and connect to each other does not prove abiogenesis or chemical evolution or it doesn't negate the need for a creator.
I mean, yes and no. One particular thing rarely proves or disproves the entirety of an idea, because that's not how science do. You have to build up a bunch of concepts together and see what it points to before you can say something does or does not prove, or at least help to prove a thing. And no one expects that to happen. However, such ideas do point towards abiogenesis. If something can happen naturally, then the things that made it are likely natural. And almost anything that can happen naturally points away from God-Man did it all at the start of the everything, because it makes it appear that he didn't need to.
All right. Proteins, which are made up of amino acids, showing that amino acids could come about naturally, which is what the Miller-Urey experiment did, does not prove that life could create itself. Those amino acids have to be put into functional sequences.
No one who knows what the hell they're talking about thinks that they proved life could create itself. But also, way to undersell what they actually did. The Miller-Urey experiment didn't just prove that amino acids could come about naturally. In a sense, we already knew that, since, they appear in natural things all the time, even if we didn't know exactly where they came from. No, what the experiment did was it proved that the very foundational chemistry of life can emerge spontaneously from simple inorganic compounds, which I have to stress is bloody huge. And again, kind of defeats the notion that a God-Man is necessary for life to be started at all. Pointing away from that particular conclusion is kind of a big deal, even if it doesn't outright refute it.
So many of you have sent me scientific papers, and you've sent me things, and none of them show that nature could put nucleotides into functional sequences for genes, for DNA, for RNA, functional DNA, RNA, and functional genes.
Well, first off, I have no idea what papers you've seen. They might be my first How-To Science 101 for Dummies. For all we know, it could literally just have been explaining how, science works, not actually trying to explain any of the higher level shit. But even if what you have seen is something worth 2 squirts of crusty jizz, that could mean one of two things, I think. Either you simply weren't sent something that tried to do that, because they 100% exist, and if we ignore your use of the word put, which suggests intention, and just say cause, plenty of papers discuss things like dry-wet cycles on clay surfaces, or volcanic hot springs, causing nucleotides to naturally link into chains. But the second, and I fear far more likely explanation, is that you just didn't understand what the hell you were reading.
And none of them show me that amino acids would arrange themselves into functional sequences necessary for life.
Right, again with your use of leading language. They don't arrange themselves, right? Like, tell me you don't understand what the claim is without telling me you don't understand what the claim is by adding words like put or themselves or anything else like that suggests some kind of will. They arrange as a function of processes. They essentially fall into those sequences because of some forcing around them. Not, and I cannot stress this enough, because they wanted to do that. Also, it appears that you're assuming that the more modern sequences that we see today are the same ones that formed well enough for early life to happen. When no, you don't actually need anything even near that complex to be good enough to kickstart those early processes. Just so you know, because I'm pretty sure that you don't.
And you need both of them. If you have just the functional information for life, you have just genes, well, you need proteins to turn those into other proteins or structures. All right. If you just have proteins, well, that's nothing, because you need that information recorded so that more could be made.
Well, good news, dumbass. Both the things that you seem to think we need, based on your previous points, are absolutely demonstrable. But the really funny thing, as I understand it, RNA can perform the functions of both proteins and DNA at the same time, which completely skips over your incredibly lame objection. Also, it's my understanding the thing that builds proteins is ribosome, so you're wrong on that front to boot. And guess what that has in it? Yeah, RNA. What did I tell you about this guy and his inability to understand scientific papers? Hell, I would be surprised if he could actually read.
If nature were by accident to make a functional protein, well, that wouldn't matter because you need the record for it. And so what you need is a simultaneous evolution of functional information in proteins, and that would never happen.
And it would never happen because, trust me, bro, I have read, failed to understand, hundreds of scientific papers. Wow. The abstracts of scientific papers. Wow. A line and a half synopsis of the abstract that shows up under the link to a paper that I definitely clicked. Well, I would have, but I couldn't be bothered. Again, and super ironic for you to claim to understand anything, but not know of the existence of RNA. And again, it literally has the capacity to do both things, and is in fact believed to be the thing that came first. So the ability to make and store complex structures came with the beginnings of life. But then there's also the suggestion that things don't evolve side by side, when it absolutely is a thing that happens in evolution for all sorts of shit. The suggestion that things couldn't is wild.
Because you're talking about a very long sequence that has to be functional in the hundreds, right? Not all of them in the hundreds, but some proteins I think are even 1,000 amino acids long. So you're talking about this long sequence that has to be functional.
Do you think these long-ass guys just appeared out of nowhere? I mean, you have used the word random already, a favorite amongst idiots and creationists when discussing evolution. But then again, I am being redundant when I say that. Any long chain of anything will have started out as likely a much shorter one, because it doesn't take much for something to be functional. Also, even the longer things don't have to be functional to exist. All they tend to need is to not be so detrimental that the creature that has it becomes incapable of breeding and passing it along. And the thing is, if it eventually mutates into something useful that increases their chances of survival / their ability to procreate, well then now it's far more likely to make it into the overall gene pool and stick around potentially forever.
Now, here's some things that atheists try to say. There's this dumb...
Oh, I could finish that one. Group of people who go on the internet and say stupid things about science and or atheism, and it makes it really, really obvious that they are in fact the biggest idiots on the entire planet. Yeah, I know that's not what he's actually going to say, but that is almost always what X group says mean, especially when it comes from individuals like this. Because seriously, wouldn't it be easier to just show what they say? But then you have to find it and not accidentally cherry pick or quote mine them, and that's a whole ordeal. So why bother, right?
Belief by Richard Dawkins, I believe, and Brian Cox, that if monkeys were typing on a typewriter for an infinite amount of time, they would eventually come up with Shakespeare, works of Shakespeare.
Oh my God, does not exist. Are you serious? That's not a belief of either of those guys as far as I'm aware. It is a super duper old analogy designed to demonstrate the unintuitive nature of infinity. Also, you didn't even get the thing right. It's an infinite number of monkeys typing on an infinite number of typewriters for an infinite amount of time. And it is absolutely not supposed to be taken literally. It's more of a thought experiment to make you realize just how vast infinity really is. And this is worst of all, has literally nothing to do with how evolution works. Not even close. And I am all but sure you are about to explain just how much you don't understand what the hell you are talking about.
And that's ridiculous. And here's why. They're thinking about it in the wrong way. They're thinking that all possible outcomes would come about.
No, they're not, because no one uses that analogy to explain how evolution works, you utter goon. And the fact that you think they do, well, I can only assume that you either heard that concept and presumed that other people think it, or some of your buddies told you that's what anybody thinks and didn't question it for a second before rushing to the internet to share your newfound stupid with the rest of the morons. Because yeah, evolution at no point would expect all possibilities to happen. The theory only expects that some amount of change will happen because it does happen all the time. But it's still functioning within a finite universe. So the expectation that something infinite would happen for no reason is only something that creationists believe.
And I disagree, and here's why.
Oh no, you disagree with your blatant straw man of what anyone believes about anything. Well, that is a shocking state of affairs. I mean, who would have thunk that an apologist would make something up and then attempt to debunk it and go on to think that they had said something of value, rather than demonstrating for the millionth time that when you start doing apologetics, your brain falls out. Or, maybe it's the other way around. But either way, someone's brain fell out and apologetics started to happen at about the same time.
Nature doesn't keep a record. Nature doesn't say, well, I've already tried that and that didn't work, right? Nature's just randomly connecting nucleotides and amino acids, and these monkeys would just be randomly typing. They're not keeping track and saying, well, we already tried that. Let's change this.
Evolution does keep a record. I mean, sure, it doesn't keep a record of the failures, but you know what does stick around? The successes. You notice how he's only focusing on the things that don't work, when of course the things that don't work don't stick around. And yes, they would likely in fact turn up again and again and again, but that doesn't matter, because if they're detrimental to any given critter, they are likely to bounce off. Think of it this way. If you had a guy who has no qualifications, possibly some kind of internet theist perhaps, who's applying for a high-level position that he could never possibly get, but the place never permanently rejects anyone, and they are always hiring new people. Well, just because Moron McGee keeps applying and not getting anywhere doesn't mean that all the actually qualified people aren't getting hired all the time, which would make this company the absolute leader in whatever its field is, because it's holding pretty much all the greatest minds. They wouldn't become less capable of hiring experts just because they reject all the worthless idiots over and over again.
Right? And so you need to look at it in this way. In order for monkeys to type out a work of Shakespeare, they would have to make sure it's mistake-free. There are no mistakes in it.
Again, demonstrating that not only do you not understand the science that you are trying to refute, but also that you don't understand how a fairly basic analogy works. The idea is not that they would iterate on Shakespeare, slowly refining it over time until they eventually write it out perfectly. It is that at some point in literal infinity, that one of the random series of keystrokes, if everyone were tried in every possible order, which is essentially guaranteed with literal infinity, one of those sets would have to be the complete works of Shakespeare. But it would also include every version of it that is incomplete, or full of errors, or even every single nearly perfect version with only a singular error. All of them. Because that is infinity for you. If something is happening, eventually you get every version of it. But again, not how evolution works. And if the typing concept did work like actual evolution does, aka it tends to keep the good version and discard the errors over and over again, you would in fact end up with a complete work of Shakespeare, and probably in a hell of a lot quicker time than you would without such selection process. And, oh wait, evolution has a selection process. Who would have thunk? Except anybody who knows anything about it.
Right? That's where monkeys can't do that. They can't look at what they're typing and avoid mistakes. Nature doesn't know it's trying to produce genes. Nature doesn't know it's trying to produce functional proteins when it's connecting nucleotides for the genes and amino acids for the proteins.
Nature is not trying to do anything. There is no try. There is no attempt. There is nothing in the universe that is intentionally making choices about how shit works. It just does. Also, it's not capable of knowing anything either. Again, all these things are just processes that come under the umbrella of nature. But nature isn't like the god of atheism or anything like that. Mother Nature is just a twee colloquialism that people use to explain that the thing that reality is to simpletons who can't wrap their head around the idea that reality doesn't have any kind of will or want or any of that shit you associate with people. Unfortunately, now people think nature is a literal person who does stuff, and idiots like you run with it, intentionally or otherwise, and sound like even bigger idiots than we thought you were in the first place.
And therefore, it's not trying to make it mistake-free. It's just connecting them randomly together. And I made a video called The Atheist Test where I tell you to try the same thing. Randomly type blindly on a computer without autocorrect, in roughly 200 characters or so, and see if you can come up with a functional paragraph. It's not going to happen.
Oh, so that's how you wrote this video. It is starting to make a lot more sense now. Holy shit, dude. Again, that's not how the monkey thing works, and not how evolution works. If I could smash a keyboard randomly and blindly with no rest for all eternity, it's actually really not going to take all that long to get one functional paragraph. Seriously, you're asking for a microscopically tiny sample size versus literal infinity, and genuinely thinking that you're making a good point. And again, evolution has selection. So if you let me pick a single letter to keep after each attempt, I could make a functional sentence after exactly 200 tries. Possibly even less. It's actually embarrassing how confident you are about this while being so catastrophically ignorant.
You could come up with some 3-letter words. It's hard to get a 4-letter word. It's hard to get words in a row. It's hard to get a complete sentence, let alone a paragraph. And that's what would be equivalent to coming up with functional genes and functional proteins.
No, it isn't, because you have literally no idea what you're talking about. That's the problem with not actually learning anything about the ideas that you wish to refute. You end up coming up with these tests and analogies and all sorts of other shit that makes no sense. They don't work because you're effectively fighting blind, tied up with earplugs in, and expecting your random ineffectual flailing to topple a building. It's just not going to happen. You aren't the walking tactical nuke that you think you are. At best, you're a cap gun that has the action rusted shut.
And even if nature could do that, it has to get them to work together, which would be very hard.
Nature doesn't have to do anything. It literally just is. Things happen. We see that they happen. And then we try to figure out why they happen. And that's another problem that you guys have, because your thing is made up nonsense drawn from betwixt the cheeks of liars and morons. You assume that science must be made up nonsense too. But no, the things we know about how reality works, we know them because we checked, we tested, we examined, and then we checked again. Until we have this huge body of evidence that backs up all the conclusions that we made from that evidence and testing and what have you. These aren't just guesses about how things work. They aren't just explanations with nothing behind them. They are the sum total of our demonstrable knowledge about the universe. And just because you're too ridiculous to understand any of it, or too lazy to even try, doesn't mean that you get to be correct by virtue of believing something wrong.
So I proved God. That is the proof. It's not that I proved God. I'm just pointing out what nature is, what we see in life, and that nature cannot produce that.
Not even close, my dude. All you have proven is that it doesn't take a brain to smugly pontificate about subjects you are woefully unqualified to discuss. And worst of all, even if anything you had said here was even remotely accurate, hell, even if all of it was the opposite of the idiotic nonsense it so clearly is, and you had actually demonstrated that evolution just couldn't happen, you don't get to shove your God in its place. You don't prove God by refuting a scientific claim. All you have is an empty space where the explanation was. And just because you believe you're one doesn't give you the right to put it in its place.
So may you be honest with yourself, and may you realize that nature cannot put things in functional sequences without a mind. All right. Just like you randomly typing blindly, just pecking at a computer, you would not be able to make a functional paragraph.
The sheer bloody irony of you telling us to be honest with ourselves while not having the intellectual honesty to learn thing one about the subjects you are attempting to defeat is so hilarious that I think it's completely broken my ability to laugh. But just know, I would be doing that now and forever after watching this video.